My parents canceled my wedding behind my back and told everyone I got cold feet. I stayed silent, until the day of the ceremony, when I live-streamed the real wedding from another country. They found out mid-speech. Imagine waking up on a random Tuesday thinking it's just another day closer to your wedding, and instead, you get blindsided by the most backhanded betrayal of your life by your own damn parents. 1 week. I had 1 week left until I was supposed to marry Jamie, the woman I met 5 years ago when I spilled black coffee on her beige pants and the worst first impression anyone's ever made at a Starbucks in Dayton, Ohio. We got through long distance, job switches, the death of her cat, and the birth of my nephew, and through it all, I truly believed we were solid. Until Richard and Deborah happened. Now, before you think I'm about to paint them as complete villains, let me tell you this. My parents are the kind of people who can compliment you and insult you in the same breath without blinking. You look so much better now that you've lost that baby fat, they'd say, with their perfect southern hospitality tone and those fake-ass smiles they've worn since 1984. Those smiles have fooled pastors, lawyers, the PTA, and half the goddamn city. It's weaponized charm. My whole childhood was a game of performance. Act right, speak right, sit straight, smile wide, even when your heart's breaking, especially then. So, yeah, I didn't grow up with hugs and bedtime stories. I grew up with posture checks and scheduled hair appointments and the constant suffocating message that I was never enough unless they made me enough. Richard and Deborah believe in control the way some people believe in God, fully, unquestionably, religiously. They tolerated Jamie. That's the best way I can put it. She wasn't from our circle, meaning she wasn't a dentist, a lawyer, or someone with a country club membership. She was a high school teacher, a good one who bought books for kids whose parents couldn't afford them and coached JV volleyball even when it meant staying late. They called her charming in a rustic way. Translation? She wasn't their type and therefore not mine. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what Richard and Deborah thought. I was finally doing something for me. Hell, I even picked my own damn suit without them. Simple, elegant, no frills. Not the designer monstrosity they kept pushing. That probably pissed them off more than anything. What I didn't know at the time was that they had started making calls. Quiet ones. Behind the scenes. Smiling while they did it, probably in silk robes with glasses of rosé in hand. They called the venue and pretended to be me, claimed there was a change of plans. They emailed the caterer and said there'd been a family emergency. They contacted Jamie's parents and said I was having a breakdown. They didn't cancel everything all at once. That would have been too obvious. They dismantled my wedding like bomb technicians, one careful piece at a time. And the worst part? They made themselves the victims. That's their specialty. When people started asking questions, because of course they did, this is small-town Ohio, where gossip travels faster than a cold in kindergarten. They held a brunch. A fucking brunch. Quiche, champagne, and lies. They told everyone I had cold feet, said it with this misty look in their eyes like they were just so heartbroken for me. Poor Ethan, they said. He's so overwhelmed. I think he's just not ready for marriage. We told him, you don't have to do this if you're not sure. Can you believe that shit? I wasn't even invited to the damn brunch. Jamie was out of town that weekend, visiting a friend in Boston, so by the time she heard the rumors, it was too late. People had already decided. The story had roots, legs, and teeth. And I didn't say a single word, not to defend myself, not to correct them, not yet. You might be asking, why the silence? Why not scream the truth from the rooftops or at least post a long, scathing Facebook status? God knows it crossed my mind. But here's the thing. Sometimes, silence is more powerful than rage. Sometimes, waiting is the best revenge. You let the liars keep digging and then when the light hits, boom. Instant exposure. I knew I'd only get one shot to do this right. One chance to flip the script in a way that would make people remember my truth, not their version of it. And I wanted it to burn. I wanted them to feel it in their bones. So I smiled. I let them have their little party. I let them cry fake tears over champagne and croissants. I stayed quiet. I let everyone think I was the broken one. But inside, I was already planning the real wedding. And this time, Richard and Deborah weren't on the guest list. It didn't take long for the pieces to start falling into place, each one landing with a quiet little thud that somehow echoed louder than a scream. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting, that maybe there had been a mix-up, a miscommunication, something you could chalk up to crossed wires or wedding chaos. But it wasn't chaos. It was calculation. And the more I pulled at the threads, the more I realized just how deliberate it all was. It started with an email, or rather, the absence of one. I'd been corresponding with the venue manager, a sharp woman named Teresa who ran the estate like a general marshalling her troops. Every exchange we'd had been prompt, professional, and clear. But suddenly, nothing. No replies to my questions about seating charts, no confirmations, no final invoices. I called once, twice, 3 times. No answer. Finally, I drove there in person because when the world around you starts to get foggy, sometimes you have to go straight to the source. Teresa looked surprised when I showed up. Not annoyed. Not angry. Just surprised. She came out of the back office, wearing a headset and holding a clipboard like always. Her eyebrows lifted the second she saw me. Oh, she said, hesitant and polite. You didn't cancel? That sentence hit harder than any slap my parents never dared to give me. I stood there, stunned, trying to keep the nausea from crawling up my throat. What do you mean cancel? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Teresa blinked. We got an email from you. Well, someone claiming to be you. They said the wedding was off. They requested no contact due to emotional stress. It sounded serious. We refunded the deposit to the original payment card. I didn't need to guess whose card that was. My parents had insisted on paying the venue deposit as a gift, part of their grand campaign to appear generous and parental in front of Jamie's family. Always appearances. Always optics. I kept my face still while my stomach turned inside out. I asked Teresa if she had the email. She pulled it up. The subject line was all lowercase. My father always forgets to capitalize his subjects. He also used loose instead of lose, which is a dead giveaway. It's his biggest grammar flaw. He's always been too busy for spelling, Deborah says. The proof was right there in front of me. My parents had forged the cancellation. That was the first punch. The second came later that afternoon when I called the caterer. I got a very enthusiastic man named Josh on the line who apologized profusely for the whole situation and reassured me the 20% cancellation fee had already been deducted. I asked what he meant. He said, we refunded the rest to your parents' card, just like they asked. I hope you're doing okay, by the way. Cold feet happens to a lot of grooms. You're not alone. That's when I knew they hadn't stopped with emails. They were crafting a narrative, an image of me as fragile, unstable, indecisive. And it was working because they've been rehearsing that role my whole life. If Richard and Deborah are anything, they're method actors in polo shirts and pearls. What I didn't expect, what really drove the knife in deeper was what they told Jamie's family. I found out 2 days later when her brother Mark messaged me, trying to be gentle, trying not to sound judgmental. Hey. I just wanted to say I hope you're okay, he wrote. Your parents said you needed space, so I'm respecting that. Just wanted you to know we love you and support whatever you decide. Space. That's the word they used. Like I was off on some soul-searching journey instead of standing in the wreckage of my own hijacked wedding. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I just screenshotted everything and put it in a folder titled Truth. I knew if I opened my mouth too soon, they would twist it, flip it, feed it back to the world with silver spoons and fake tears. I knew I had to be quiet, strategically quiet. Then, the icing on the cake came from a neighbor who spotted Richard and Deborah leaving a catering service. Not a coincidence. They were there planning a celebration, a post-wedding reception for close friends and family. That's what they told them. To honor what should have been, they said. I guess in their minds, a cancelled wedding was a better excuse to throw a party than a graduation or a promotion. Never waste a moment to be the center of attention. But here's the kicker, and it's so dumb I almost laughed. The venue they booked could only hold 75 people, but somehow they invited 120 and expected no one to notice. They were so caught up in their own fantasy that even basic math didn't matter anymore. I sat back. I let them dig. I let them decorate and plan and print little menu cards with fake initials and pastel roses. I let them shine in their delusion because I wasn't going to stop them. I was going to outshine them, and I already had the perfect plan. When I disappeared, I didn't leave a trace. No cryptic quotes on Instagram, no vague tweets, no angry texts sent in the middle of the night begging people to believe me or take my side because the truth is, I didn't want sympathy, and I sure as hell didn't need validation. What I needed was a clean break from the noise, and what I craved more than anything was precision. A plan so tight it would snap back like a rubber band and hit my parents square in the ego at the exact second they opened their mouths to spread another carefully curated lie in a room full of people they thought they could fool. Jamie and I left the country without telling a soul. We packed our bags, turned off our phones, and flew to Italy on a Tuesday morning so quiet and beautiful it felt like the beginning of a different life. I booked 2 one-way tickets, and as the plane took off, I didn't even look out the window. I just closed my eyes and let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like months, maybe even years. The betrayal hadn't broken us. It had solidified something between Jamie and me that hadn't quite been there before. We used to talk about loyalty like it was romantic, like something soft and poetic you whisper at night when everything's going right. Now it felt sharper, harder, something we could actually lean on when the world turned to shit around us. She had believed me immediately, without question, without hesitation. Not just because she loved me, but because she knew who Richard and Deborah were. She'd seen it, too. Maybe not everything, but enough to know that they'd rather burn the house down than admit someone else built it. Italy was our quiet place. We stayed in a small villa outside of Amalfi that smelled like rosemary and sea salt, with cracked stone floors and doors that creaked when the wind rolled in off the coast. We planned everything ourselves, down to the smallest detail. No wedding planner. No guest list. No suit fittings with Richard and Deborah pretending to be supportive while slowly picking me apart in front of a mirror. Just us, a local officiant named Marco, and a pair of friends who flew in under fake names just to avoid any traceable trail. It felt like a crime heist movie, and honestly, it kind of was. Operation Honey Badger. That's what I called it. Because if you've ever watched one of those documentaries, you know a honey badger doesn't give a damn. It doesn't care how big the enemy is. It just keeps going, and it never plays by the rules. That's what I wanted. Not a confrontation. A clean kill. Metaphorically speaking, of course. We chose the date for our wedding not based on sentiment or tradition, but pure strategy. It had to align perfectly with my parents' little charade, a reception they were hosting in our hometown country club, complete with custom flower arrangements, a monogrammed ice sculpture, and speeches they planned to deliver in the spirit of forgiveness. That's what they called it in the press release they had their friends sneak into the local paper. Yes. They actually printed an announcement about a cancelled wedding reception as if they were saving face at a political gala. The two of them are nothing if not consistent. So I timed everything down to the second. Our ceremony would begin at exactly 5:30 p.m. in Italy, which, because I did the time zone math very carefully, was 11:30 a.m. back home. Richard and Deborah had their speeches scheduled for exactly that time because, of course, they did. They were calling it a moment of reflection, and I knew, without a doubt, that they would be standing there in some designer suits, gripping microphones with one hand and mimosas with the other, preparing to sell the room on their version of the truth. But here's where it gets good. I didn't just plan a wedding. I planned a performance. We hired a local videographer, someone low profile but good, with a setup that allowed us to live stream in full HD with crystal clear audio. I didn't want a single glitch. Not one pixel of lag. Jamie and I had written vows that weren't just about love, but about survival, about betrayal, about truth. I told my story in mine, not directly, not by name, but in a way that anyone watching would understand exactly what had happened and who it was meant for. And then, the final touch, the livestream link. It was anonymous, sent from a burner account, timed with a scheduled email blast that would hit every single person attending my parents' fake reception at the exact moment they stepped up to the mic. Friends, family, neighbors, even the woman who used to cut my hair in high school, all of them would get the notification on their phones. The real wedding of Ethan and Jamie, live now. I had watched them build their stage. I had stayed silent while they hammered the nails into the set, dressed it in roses and fake sincerity, and prepped themselves to steal the spotlight. But what they didn't realize, what they never considered, is that sometimes the quiet ones aren't weak. They're just watching, waiting, calculating. I scheduled the ceremony down to the second. And trust me, that live stream link was going to light a fire under their designer heels right when they took the mic. There are moments in life so delicately timed, so surgically precise in their execution, that they almost don't feel real when they happen, like time slows down just enough for the truth to step in and take over everything else. That was the moment my parents took the microphone in the grand ballroom at the Wellington Country Club. Standing on a raised platform surrounded by crystal vases full of roses they never paid for and guests they had deceived with the kind of ease that only comes from years of mastering the art of the lie. Richard wore a navy suit with a pale blue tie, crisp and perfect. Deborah stood beside him in an elegant lavender dress with her signature pearl necklace, and her makeup was done in the soft glow style that made her look like she was permanently lit by candlelight, because of course appearances mattered more than reality, especially when the truth was ugly and inconvenient. My father cleared his throat the way he always did before speaking to a crowd, just a soft little cough meant to draw attention to the fact that he was about to say something important. And as they looked out over the crowd of 100 or so people, friends, extended relatives, old PTA parents, church acquaintances, and God knows how many people they invited just to prove they still had influence, they began their speech, the one they had rehearsed in front of the mirror probably 50 times. Richard's voice was calm, polished, like a talk show host trying to segue into something heartfelt. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice echoing slightly against the high ceilings of the ballroom. "This isn't the day any of us expected. It's not the day we dreamed of, and certainly not the celebration we had all envisioned. But in the spirit of love and healing, we felt it was important to still gather. To honor what could have been." People nodded. Some gave polite smiles, others looked vaguely uncomfortable, unsure of whether they were supposed to clap or sit in reverent silence. Deborah nodded solemnly at her husband's side before taking the mic. "As parents, you never want to see your child struggle," she added with practiced emotion. "But sometimes the best love we can give is support through difficult decisions." And just as she inhaled to begin her next sentence, the first ding echoed through the room. It was faint. Just one phone at first, then another, and then a wave of digital notifications began chiming like tiny bells through the silence, a chain reaction of confusion and curiosity spreading seat by seat. Heads began to turn downward as guests checked their screens, eyes widening in real time as they read the title of the live stream. The Real Wedding of Ethan and Jamie. Live Now. At first, my parents didn't seem to notice. They smiled, lips tight, prepared to continue their little performance. But then a murmur swept through the crowd, quiet at first and then growing louder as more and more people opened their phones and watched the video that had just gone live. The screen showed a wide shot of the Amalfi Coast, sun-drenched and unreal, with white petals scattered on a stone isle and a string quartet playing something soft and lovely in the background. The camera then zoomed in slowly as Jamie and I walked into frame, me in a simple white suit, the kind that didn't need approval or applause, and Jamie in a flowing cream-colored dress that caught the Mediterranean light perfectly. Just us, walking slowly, hand in hand, toward a tiny floral archway with the sea sparkling behind us. My parents' faces changed in increments, like watching a storm creep across the sky. First, confusion, then dawning realization, then something else, fear, maybe, or rage, or that specific brand of humiliation that only truly hits when a lie gets pulled apart in front of an audience. Someone near the front row gasped, and someone else whispered, "Is that them?" The answer came a moment later when my voice filled the ballroom speakers as clearly as if I were standing there next to them. "This is my wedding," I said into the camera, my voice calm, steady, unafraid. Not the fake one my parents canceled. Not the pity party they're throwing right now. This is real love. And if you're at that country club, you're at the wrong party. There was no music behind my words, no slideshow of childhood photos or emotional piano track. Just truth, raw, and deliberate, cutting through the layers of my parents' carefully fabricated world like a knife through fondant. Some guests looked horrified, others shocked, and a few, just a few, looked like they'd finally seen something they'd always suspected but never dared to believe. One woman stood up and walked out without saying a word, shaking her head. A man near the back chuckled under his breath and muttered, "Well, damn." A few phones turned to record their reactions. My father's face hardened into a mask I knew all too well, the same expression he wore whenever I disappointed him growing up. My mother's hand went to her throat, clutching her pearls as if they might offer some protection from the truth. They didn't speak. They didn't even try to take back the mic. They just stood there, mouths slightly open, fingers clutching the podium like it might float them out of the room. Someone reached out to help them down from the stage, but they waved them off, turned around slowly, and this is the part that stuck with people. Deborah dropped the microphone. Literally. Let it fall from her hand with a loud clunk that echoed through the stunned silence of 100 people watching their world collapse in high definition. They didn't finish their sentences. They didn't even try. And maybe that was the smartest thing they could have done in that moment, because anything they said would have only dug the hole deeper. The truth had already spoken. And it was beautiful. Back in Italy, Jamie squeezed my hand as we said our vows, and I never once looked at the camera again. That moment wasn't for them. It wasn't even for the crowd back home. It was for me. But I knew deep down that I had just burned the house Richard and Deborah built down to the foundation, and not a single drop of water in that ballroom was going to put it out. They say silence is golden, but sometimes silence is just the sound that follows after the explosion has already gone off, and there's nothing left to do but walk through the smoke and sort through the wreckage. That's exactly what the aftermath felt like. Me, alone in a villa on the Amalfi Coast, barefoot and holding a half glass of wine, staring at the sea while the world spun itself into a frenzy thousands of miles away. The reception my parents hosted, the fake one, the show, died before dessert. Half the guests left immediately after my voice came over their phones. Some left mid-bite, still holding forks, too stunned or too embarrassed to finish the salmon or listen to another minute of the lies they bought into so easily. I heard from someone, I won't say who, but let's just say they're no longer on my parents' Christmas card list, that they tried to salvage the moment by pretending it was some kind of cruel joke, claiming the video was old or doctored or probably AI, because that's the newest excuse people use when they're desperate to avoid accountability. They even said I had edited it months ago and timed it to sabotage their event, as if I were some kind of internet hacker with nothing better to do than destroy their fake brunch party from across the Atlantic. But the room wasn't buying it anymore. You could feel it in the way people stopped making eye contact with them, in how their friends' fake laughs started drying up, in the way chairs scraped back from the tables as guests made excuses and headed for the door. Of course, the video didn't stay private. One of the guests, again, I won't say who, posted it online before the dessert card even made it around. By morning, it was on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and every group chat within a 50-mile radius of our town. One version had over 400,000 views within 48 hours, complete with dramatic music layered underneath my vows and someone's voice whispering, "This is what real revenge looks like." The comments were chaos. Some people calling it iconic, others calling it petty, a few calling it performance art, and at least one person saying, "This is why I don't trust parents-in-law." That one got 5,000 likes. Jamie's family called us 2 days later, and I'll be honest, I was nervous picking up the phone. Her mom, Sharon, was never cold, but she had that Midwestern way of keeping her tone polite even when she was furious, and I expected a lecture or, at the very least, a long-winded explanation about keeping family intact and keeping private matters private. But instead, she just sighed and said, "I wish you'd told us. We would have believed you. We know what they're like now." It was like something unknotted inside my chest. Jamie spoke to her for almost an hour after that, just catching up, like nothing had exploded across our lives, except it had, and somehow the fallout was settling in a way I hadn't expected. But not everyone was kind. I got messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some of them just wanting gossip, others accusing me of being cruel, of humiliating my parents, of choosing spectacle over grace. One man, who once told me I should be more respectful at church, sent a 3-paragraph essay about forgiveness and how airing dirty laundry would curse the marriage. I didn't respond to him. I didn't respond to most of them, to be honest, because they weren't really asking questions. They were just uncomfortable with the fact that I didn't play the quiet son, that I didn't let the lie stand just to keep things tidy. The truth is, I don't regret what I did. I've asked myself that question more times than I can count, lying in bed with the sea breeze coming through the shutters, my phone glowing beside me with another 10 unread messages, some full of congratulations, others full of accusations. Was it too much? Maybe. But sometimes too much is exactly what it takes to wake people up. Sometimes fire is the only thing that leaves a mark deep enough for people to stop pretending they didn't see what was happening all along. Jamie and I stayed in Italy for another 2 weeks. We didn't rush back. We didn't check in. We lived like we were completely off the grid, even though the world kept trying to pull us back in. And every evening, just before sunset, I walked out to the edge of the cliffs near our villa, barefoot on the warm stone, and stared out at the horizon where the sea met the sky. And I remembered how small I used to feel under my parents' shadow. How every decision I made growing up had to be filtered through their lens of respectability and performance and appearances. How I'd shrink myself just to keep the peace, just to be the good son they could parade in front of their friends like a trophy. But now I felt big. Bigger than I ever had. And a little bit haunted too, not by what I'd done, but by the silence that followed it. Richard and Deborah haven't called. Not once. Not a text. Not a voicemail. Not a forwarded email trying to explain themselves or gaslight me into thinking I misunderstood their actions. Nothing. And that silence? It's louder than anything they've ever said. Maybe that's the real funeral that happened that day, not the one for the cancelled wedding, not the one for their fake reception, but the quiet burial of whatever tie still existed between us. Whatever rope they used to tug at me with, the one I'd kept tied around my neck out of habit and guilt and love, I cut it. I watched it fall. I don't know if I'll ever hear from them again. Maybe that's the real question that lingers in the quiet moments when the world stops spinning, not whether what I did was right, but whether what comes after will be worth it. The truth is, I don't know. But for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to find out. When we finally decided to return to the States, it wasn't because we missed home or felt guilty or even because we ran out of money. It was because running away, even to paradise, even when justified, starts to feel like fear after a while. And if there's one thing I learned from this whole mess, it's that I'm not afraid anymore, not of my parents, not of their disappointment, not of living a life they didn't approve of. We landed on a Thursday, rented a car, and drove straight to Jamie's parents' house in Cincinnati. The reunion was quiet, no banners, no streamers, no staged photos for social media. Just real hugs and coffee at the kitchen table while Sharon showed us pictures of their new puppy and Jamie's dad, Mike, asked careful questions about our plans. "Are you going back to your place?" he finally asked, eyes concerned but not pushing. The question hung in the air for a moment. "No," I said. "We're looking at places in Columbus." "Fresh start," Jamie added, squeezing my hand under the table. Sharon nodded like she understood completely. "You're always welcome here until you find something." That night, we slept in Jamie's childhood bedroom, surrounded by old debate team trophies and faded band posters, and I lay awake thinking about how different our upbringings had been. How her parents asked instead of told, listened instead of lectured, loved instead of performed loving. The next morning, 2 things happened. First, a job offer came through for Jamie, a position at a high school in Columbus that needed an English teacher mid-year. It was perfect timing, almost suspiciously so, like the universe was finally aligning to give us a break. The second thing was an envelope. Plain white, hand-delivered to Sharon's mailbox. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Always perfect, always precise, just like everything else in her life except her relationship with her son. I took the envelope to the back porch and sat alone in one of those wooden rocking chairs that creak with every movement. The letter was short, just half a page of my father's company stationery. "Ethan," it began, "no dear, no son, just my name like a statement of fact. We've had time to reflect on recent events. While we disagree with your methods, we acknowledge that communication broke down between us. We're prepared to move forward if you are. Your mother has scheduled a family therapy session for next month. Details enclosed if you're interested. Dad." No apology. No admission. Just a clinical assessment of communication breakdown like we were discussing a faulty telephone line and not a deliberate, calculated sabotage of the most important day of my life. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and watched the sun rise over Sharon's garden. Then I took out my phone and, for the first time in weeks, I opened Instagram. The world had moved on, as it always does. New scandals, new dramas, new viral moments had pushed our story down the feed, replaced by celebrity breakups and political outrage. I created a new post. Just one photo of Jamie and me on that stone terrace in Italy, rings visible, sunset behind us, genuine smiles on our faces. The caption was simple: "Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the messiest endings." #new chapter. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't rehash the drama. I didn't accept their non-apology or their terms. Instead, I chose to focus on what was real, the woman beside me, the life ahead of us, the truth we'd fought for. Within an hour, the post had hundreds of likes, dozens of supportive comments, and not a single mention of the scandal. People were giving us what we needed most, the space to move forward, to be known for something other than that viral moment of justified revenge. Later that day, I took the letter to the fire pit in Sharon's backyard, struck a match, and watched it curl into ash. Jamie stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder, neither of us saying a word because sometimes, silence really is golden. Not the heavy silence of secrets and lies, but the peaceful silence of letting go, of choosing which stories you carry forward and which ones you leave behind. As the last corner of the paper blackened and disappeared, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, might never be, but release. The kind that comes when you finally stop giving someone else power over your story. Ready? Jamie asked, car keys in hand, Columbus waiting just an hour's drive away. I looked at the smoke rising into the clear blue Ohio sky, thinking about how strange it was to feel both lighter and stronger at the same time. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. And I was. Ready to write the next chapter without letting the previous one define me. Ready to build something new with the woman who had stood beside me when the world seemed determined to tear us apart. Ready to live loudly in the spaces where I'd once been silenced. Some people never got their happy endings because they spent too much time editing to please an audience that was never really watching. I was done editing. Done performing. Done shrinking. The drive to Columbus was quiet, but it wasn't the silence I'd grown up with, the tense, walking on eggshells quiet of my childhood home. It was the comfortable silence of two people who had already said everything that needed saying and were now just enjoying the journey together. As we crossed the city limits, Jamie reached over and turned up the radio. Some pop song I didn't recognize filled the car, and she started singing along, slightly off-key and completely uninhibited. I joined in on the chorus, louder than I needed to be, windows down, not caring who heard or what they thought. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing. I was just living. And damn, did it feel good. 6 months later, we were settled into our new life in Columbus. We'd found a small apartment downtown, close enough to Jamie's school that she could walk on nice days. I'd landed a position at a local marketing firm, something completely different from what I'd done before. My parents would have hated it, too creative, not prestigious enough, which made me love it even more. We were having dinner at a small Italian place we'd discovered, a hole in the wall with red checkered tablecloths and the best pasta outside of Amalfi, when my phone buzzed with a notification. I almost ignored it until I saw it was from my cousin Tyler, who I hadn't spoken to since the wedding. Heads up, the message read. Your parents are telling everyone they're flying to Italy next month to reconnect with their son and his bride. Thought you should know. Jamie saw my face change and reached for my hand. What is it? I showed her the message, watched her eyes narrow slightly, then soften. What do you want to do? It was a simple question, but one that would have paralyzed me a year ago, when every decision was filtered through the lens of what Richard and Deborah expected. Now, the answer came easily. Nothing, I said, taking a sip of wine. Let them fly to Italy. Let them search empty cafes and wander along the coast. Let them perform their concerned parent routine for the hotel staff. We'll be here, living our lives. Jamie studied my face. Are you sure? They might come looking for us here next. Let them, I said, and meant it. I'm not hiding anymore. But I'm not playing their game either. 2 weeks later, we were grocery shopping when I spotted them, standing in the produce section, examining avocados as if they were rare gems. They hadn't flown to Italy after all. They'd come straight to Columbus, probably after tracking us down through family or mutual friends. They hadn't seen us yet. We could have turned around, abandoned our half-filled cart, slipped out unnoticed. The old Ethan would have done exactly that. Instead, I squeezed Jamie's hand once, then let go. Wait here, I said. I walked up to them, calm and steady. Richard. Deborah, I said, using their first names deliberately. They turned, my mother's hand flying to her pearls in practiced surprise. Ethan. What a coincidence. No, I cut her off, my voice low but firm. No more lies. Not even small ones. You knew exactly where to find us. My father straightened his shoulders. Son, we've been worried. I'm not here for a scene or a reconciliation, I said. I just want to be clear about something. I've built a life here. A good one. If you want to be part of it someday, it starts with respect. Real respect, not the performance kind. Think about whether you're capable of that. I turned to walk away, then paused. And if you ever try to control my life again, if you spread a single lie about me or Jamie, if you so much as send a Christmas card without being invited back into our lives, you'll never see us again. That's not a threat. It's a boundary. I walked back to Jamie, who was watching with a mix of concern and pride. As we continued our shopping, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won some grand battle or delivered the perfect parting line, but because for once, I'd spoken my truth without yelling, without drama, without an audience. Just me, standing in my own power, drawing a line that felt right and true. I don't know if they'll respect it. I don't know if we'll ever have the kind of relationship worth rebuilding. But for the first time in my life, I'm okay with that uncertainty. Because this story isn't about them anymore. It's about us, Jamie and me, building something real in a world that too often settles for appearances. Some endings aren't really endings at all. They're just the first honest page of a different story altogether.